Good afternoon, everyone. Just like to thank the IAB for this excellent opportunity to be here with you guys today. And I think it's really interesting to hear all the narratives coming out of this marketplace and the creativity and the energy in this marketplace. And it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to come down to Johannesburg, or come across, actually, because I came from Sydney, to Johannesburg again. So this afternoon, I'm going to talk about a wide variety of things, my observations about the digital industry and the traditional television industry and where things are moving. Just a bit of work about what I do. I work with different pay TV businesses around the world, and we do that through experts in different markets who we collaborate with, in Scandinavia, in Australia, in South Africa, many different markets. We have a client, a partner in Los Angeles as well. And if I know there's only a few of you in the audience, but some of you have been to my house in London, where there are huge satellite dishes. It's the only place that you can watch SuperSport in central London, so that's always a benefit with a huge satellite dish. And we're tracking constantly media in many different markets, and as everything starts to move digital, it gets a lot easier to do that. We work with a lot of TV businesses, Sky in the UK, Italy and Germany, markets like Malaysia, where there's quite a broad economic or like different LSMs in their marketplace. And we get the opportunity to work in markets like the Middle East and the US with Fox. So really exciting opportunities to understand, listen to what's going on in different marketplaces around the world. And one thing that we do that's quite interesting is that we have lots of different set-top boxes and devices and voice assistants, which we use to kind of get a sense of where technology is going. And I'm sure plenty of you have those kinds of pieces of equipment at home. But the industry, broadcasting, television, digital, is going through unprecedented change. And as an example, this was yesterday, newspaper headline, I think in the Times, that Comcast, big, NBC Universal, big US cable company, is making a bid for Sky in the UK and Italy and Germany, Switzerland, and all the different markets in which they operate. So that's something just happened yesterday. And there's lots of discussion about, oh, what does this mean for Disney that we're going to buy Fox? So lots of headlines like dramatic twist. So it's sort of up and down. And as I've been sitting here this morning, it's missing. So what I was going to say is that Sky have cut a deal with Netflix. And that's a big news this morning, and it means that Netflix are going to be on Sky's latest connected set-top boxes. Now, in terms of trends in technology, what's really interesting is, and this is from the UK, but I think it applies to pretty much all markets around the world, is that massive adoption of smartphones, and the prices of smartphones with Chinese manufacturers coming down and down and down. I see that across all of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. Huge adoption of tablets, particularly Android ones in developing markets, really quite affordable now for certain segments. And smart TVs, connected smart TVs that allow you to access video content, all kinds of different services. And all the other technologies seem to be having a bad time. Everything else is sort of falling off. Some growth in smart watches and internet-connected set-top boxes, which we'll have a little word about in a moment. And if you look at another market like Australia, similar thing. People using all sorts of different connected devices, pay television's increasing, VOD, significant increase because a couple of years ago Netflix launched and they have a competitor a bit like Showmax called Stan there, and Amazon's about to launch. So much interest from Australian consumers who are very cost sensitive and very love entertainment. And the other thing I think is really important is zero rating of data for certain types of content. And I certainly noticed a few months back, Telkom now offering access to Showmax and YouTube and other services without it actually impacting on your data. And that idea comes from the US originally with something that T-Mobile, rather, created this idea called Binge On, which is basically allowing people to watch all sorts of content and not have to pay for the data. And what telcos have realized, because that's a really, mobile phones are a super competitive market, But they realize that entertainment is a really powerful tool in sort of driving customer loyalty. And there's a really good example from the US, which is if you take AT&T, you get HBO for life. So if your mobile provider is AT&T, you get HBO for life, which is obviously Game of Thrones and all that exciting content.
This is live TV on a phone. On a phone. On a phone. On a tablet, on a cool car, on a driveway. And back on a phone.
So AT&T bought the big satellite company in the US, DirecTV, and they're going through this transition now of getting people to use kind of IP-based services, streaming services, and they're actually really basically replicating everything that you would have got with your satellite dish in IP.
It's over. You, me, us, this thing we used to have. Oh, don't look at me like that. I don't need that anymore.
I'm done, actually.
Just go.
Yep, perfect. Get this. It's a great place.
So no more set-top boxes. and no more dishes. So the end of the satellite dish. I know it's a sad thing. I'm in this industry in entertainment and digital, and because the first thing I did when satellite TV sort of launched in Europe was persuade my parents to buy a huge satellite dish in the garden. That is absolutely, I swear to God, the reason I'm involved in broadcasting. And we're now at the stage where they're giving people these, sort of like an Explorer, but that doesn't need a dish. It simply connects to your broadband. So that's kind of the future. And already, I mean, this is already happening in your market. Fire TV has launched in a number of different markets around the world. That's a 4K box now, gives you access to streaming. The Now TV box, you guys are familiar with, because is it Kweze has the same technology, a Roku box. Foxtel launched an Android box that's legitimate, that has it's really fast, looks quite pretty, comes in really nice packaging, and it gives you access to Foxtel just via broadband, and it actually has an antenna tuner in it so you can watch the free channels. And, well, maybe I should ask people, does anyone know or have a Kodi box? Boo. All these people working hard in creativity, and you're not paying the people who make the content. So this is a really terrible thing, but one thing I won't dwell on it, but it's something we should keep in mind as an industry. So this is just a sort of a view of what the Amazon Fire TV box looks like, and there's lots of different apps that you can add to it, including obviously Netflix and the Amazon Fire TV. And you can add channels to the box, and there's all sorts of apps. So if you have a subscription, you can add on these different apps from broadcasters like BET or E, Hallmark Channel, True TV. Many of these brands you'll know. And a lot of these apps are ad-funded, so definitely an opportunity to grow that digital environment and monetize it. And you know, you guys are quite now used to Netflix in your marketplace. And listening to all the conversations from the people on the stage today and amongst people in the audience, you know, the essence of Netflix's success is being on every single device and using viewing data to understand what kind of propositions people are interested in. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. Now, interestingly, when it comes to the kind of streaming video or on-demand services that people use, they're actually quite a broad range in the UK. So the BBC, which I'm sure you guys know well, that's used by 63% of adults, that iPlayer application, which you can have on your phone, on your laptop, on your games console. These things are available on pretty much every connected device. Really high usage. Our commercial channel or network, because all these channels are multi-channel, just like ETV have. So there's like ITV 2, 3, 4, children's ITV. There's a whole range of ITV channels. So there's a lot of content on both those apps. So that's why that's also incredibly popular. YouTube, obviously doing quite well in terms of the usage, particularly in certain demographics. We'll look at that in a sec. But you know, those are, in terms of the usage, are sort of, or penetration, are way above where Netflix are. So the free stuff, or the ad-supported stuff, is really powerful. And then Channel 4 has their all 4 on-demand service. Amazon's less penetrated, but beware, because a subscription to Amazon is actually about home delivery of goods as well. So you pay a subscription to get access to sort of same-day delivery or next-day delivery. My5 is from the Channel 5 group, so that's Viacom's owned channels. And video on Facebook, and this is the kind of the equivalent of DSTV now. So you can see that there's a lot of variation in sort of the use of these on-demand services, and it's not just about Netflix. So a huge opportunity for free-to-air broadcasters, a huge opportunity for other content providers. And I think we should pay attention that if we were sitting here sort of 5 or 6 years ago and looking at streaming, and even if we were doing that and sitting in London or Amsterdam or wherever it happens to be, that was very fragmented. It was occasional, kind of when you needed to see something, you'd pull out your phone and see if you could see the football match or whatever. And it was designed sort of around out-of-home viewing, and all the marketing around this was about out-of-home and on the small screen. And now, this kind of IP technology is delivering the big screen, even in 4K. And so there's a company that's just been bought called Layer 3, who do kind of like that box that just connects to your internet and gives you like a PVR. Sky launched in Spain using the same technology as they have for their OTT services in the UK. And we're seeing this various content providers moving onto these streaming platforms as well. So being able to add channels to your set-top box. And the other thing that's kind of, if we're going to look at what the opportunity is of traditional television, well, and also of the streaming services, most people don't just have one, or a lot of people don't have just one streaming service. They're more likely to have Netflix and Amazon, so they don't miss out on the various shows that are on both. So, and there's also overlap with Now TV, which is Sky's service. And in terms of that overlap, because there's just a lot of conversation about cord cutting or canceling, people canceling their DSTV or other services and moving just to Netflix. It's quite a narrowly defined content proposition. And what you find is that these services are really complementary to pay TV, and there's a very small number of people, it's of less than 25% that are actually have access only to those services and don't have pay television. And I think it's interesting to look at the motivation of some of these new services that are launching around the world, but particularly in the US, because that's way ahead of many markets. And YouTube have launched a streaming TV service. And so you can, if you just have Netflix, this allows you to still watch all the American national channels like ABC, NBC, Fox. And there's also a lot of content that's related to sport. So those kind of interesting things. Sling is kind of from Dish. Hulu is they've launched streaming channels on top of their VOD offering, and DirecTV, you saw the TV commercial from that. That's just really about transitioning to IP.
Hands.
Really?
And this is what YouTube TV looks like. So you can see all the channels that it recommends for me to watch now live, and then I can jump to that channel, and so it's very similar to the YouTube experience, but it's giving me access to all these different channels. And in France, they've done something pretty clever. This company called Molotov, and they've taken all the national French channels, and they've made it possible for you to watch them on any device for free. They've got like more than 2 million subs, maybe 2.5 now. And you can pay to record stuff. And you can also add additional channels. So really changing the market. And this is a view of what the UI looks like. So basically, it's like Netflix. They're using that cover art to help you sort of navigate the programs, and you can select a program. You can restart a program. So if I click on a program, I can jump to the beginning. So it's a very sophisticated way of viewing content. And we can record shows and go back in time and various other things. So lots of new products coming to the marketplace, sort of radically changing traditional broadcast television. And the other thing is that companies like MultiChoice and Sky kind of were concerned that they hit at some point sort of a plateau in subscribers, because not everyone can afford the set-top box, the dish installation, the subscription prices. And so what you're seeing is the emergence of new sort of lower cost propositions with more flexibility. And so this is the role of Now TV. So it's kind of delivering a bit of additional growth at maybe lower price points, but still growing the audience of television, or digital television and streaming television. So just some adverts that give you a flavor. This is $7.99 a month, so way below sort of the typical Sky subscription, which is kind of £40, I suppose. And a big focus on watching all these box sets, so accessing all the previous episodes. And what's really interesting, I think, is just this starting to democratize paid television, because you've got products here that come in at $2.99, which I think is a fantastic Trojan horse. And then you can add all these things. So it's to get sports, you don't have to, like before, buy entertainment. You can just take sports for a week or sports for one day. So I think that's interesting and changing the market. And Sky been able to go into markets via IP that they've never been in before. So Spain's a market that they've gone into. They've gone into Switzerland as well with IP. I'll skip the advert for that, just for timekeeping. But I think, you know, that move and changes in consumer behavior, it's not just in the UK. You see that in Australia. So still a big chunk of people watching live television, watching all sorts of channels live. It's not just about sport. And the other percentages, the 7% and 1%, are about recorded TV and when you watch it. But 28% is around that digital content, including the streaming services. So, you know, and in terms of the devices people are still using the big screen 80% of the time. And if you look at data from ThinkBox in the UK, you can see that, that in the younger age groups, significantly higher YouTube usage, marginally higher Facebook usage, other online video, adult video, I think you'll find is slightly higher in the younger age group. Cinema, slightly higher in the younger age group as well. Subscription VOD, which is Netflix and Amazon, also higher in those younger age groups. So it is true that pay television is getting older generationally. And DVD, I mean, that's a bit of an anomaly, but, you know, it's kind of disappearing off the radar, really. But all the channels have their own VOD, and that's still quite a small part of viewing, but it's going to grow. That's recorded content, and then here you see what's remaining in the UK of live TV. So you still got, in all individuals, 60% of all individuals still are watching live television, but in the younger age groups, 40%. And I'm sure there are people who are worrying about this and building online propositions to deal with that, like the Molotov service we saw. Just thought, because data is a really big issue for the audience here, and I thought I'd talk a few bits about data. So, I mean, some of you might be familiar that the Sky boxes in the UK can serve advertising to specific individuals, true addressable advertising. An example is, I was at my mum's house, which is about an hour from London. We were sitting watching TV, and an advert popped up for a car dealership that is literally sort of, you know, the other side of the road. And so geolocation of advertising is one way of using it. Other ways you can use addressable advertising is based on information you have about someone's preferences. And we'll look at that. So, you know, if you look at the opportunity, you take the best of mass market TV and you take the addressability and you deliver it in the place where people watch television the most, right? Which is on the big screen in the living room. And this is an example of what kind of data operators have, right? So this is not just about Google. This is about someone like MultiChoice or Canal Plus. And, you know, the opportunity is to look at people's interests and hobbies, to look at the data from their viewing, and then use that to understand people's interests and preferences. And then when it comes to doing targeted advertising, you have these attributes. So a whole lot of information to target people in particular households. Like, in terms of people's lifestyle, you've got ex-council community, rural solitude, which I'm looking forward to. And you can target basically with, I think, over 530 attributes to talk to specific audiences or customer groups. The other thing I want to talk about is a big issue in the industry about brand safety, and I wanted to talk about the role of television in that mix. But starting off with the digital side of things, I mean, there's some pretty horrible organizations out there like Britain First, kind of xenophobic, racist group of people. And, you know, it's not great if your advertising appears on YouTube with that kind of content. So that's a real problem. And I think there's a big issue in terms of blind programmatic, so not being able to see what you're buying. And I think, you know, we need to move is to help people buy content that's contextually relevant. And so have that transparency rather than chasing the cookie. I think, you know, fake news and extremist content, I mean, we've seen that in the US. And I think, you know, there's a whole opportunity for brand safe content funded by digital businesses. And you're seeing a lot of that now with YouTube and Snapchat, YouTube Originals, funding content that people can embrace. And I think, you know, television still has that long-standing regulation. So I think that's kind of an important part to ensure the quality. So recommendation is obviously be careful what you buy. You know, if it's cheap, it's probably because it's in unknown content environments, and that's a major issue. And I think that content and context is critical. So I think, you know, the way of dealing with this brand safety issue is to buy more safe media where you understand the context. And I think if you survey consumers, very much television is at the forefront of content that people trust, traditional newspapers, and as we go down, you can see that YouTube is clearly not trusted. Social media not trusted broadly, but when it comes to people's or celebrities' recommendations, it is incredibly powerful. And I think we should recognize the power of multi-platform television. This is some work from Accenture, this cross-channel advertising attribution study that I recommend downloading. It's freely available on the web. This is from 2016. But really, they're saying that without television, digital is significantly less effective. The ROI of television is actually should be adjusted in terms of you know, about 10%. And you see that the impact of these types of digital activity without television, without multi-platform television, if that wasn't there, it would be substantially lower across these different types of, even short-form video is less effective without more broadcast-like television. I think, you know, there are challenges in brand work and activation, or, you know, excite, ignite is one way of looking at it. And I think, you know, we need to pay attention in terms of how far we're looking ahead and how we measure and how far ahead we measure. We need to think about the brand building activity and measure that, not just small transactions. How many sales did you, and this is every company these days, right? You go into the Monday morning meeting, they say, how many sales? And that's why we focus on this lower section. We're not necessarily focusing on building the brands. And there's some really interesting research around the effectiveness of different screens. Mobile is fantastic for transactions, but in terms of the effectiveness of TV on all devices, that has really higher levels of attention, and there's a number of reasons for that. And I think, you know, we should also look at, you know, the opportunity through brand work to kind of explain what the brand message is to a broad audience, because those audiences are the people that kind of, when we wear a Lacoste t-shirt, we want people to know what those brand attributes mean, even if you're not in the market for a Lacoste t-shirt. So, just in terms of some broad conclusions for our session today, I think that when it comes to framing the marketplace and saying, well, this is television versus digital, actually, it really isn't. We're all moving to a common position where digital is able to deliver really rich brand experiences and huge amounts of creativity with the added value of data. And television is moving into that data space as well, so really targeting consumers. And I think, you know, the other thing to think about is how people use digital while watching traditional television. So you can't separate them and report like that. I think that clearly, as you've seen from the recent IAB conference with the guy from Unilever, or if we want to go back to Mark Pritchard, there's big issues around one standard for measurability for all media, and we need to kind of work together as an industry to help sort of define that. And I think, you know, we also need to look and measure longer term so we understand the impact of traditional television in terms of its impact on return on investment, on effectiveness. I think the brand safety issues are really about, you know, we're still in a very immature industry, and there's a whole lot of content out there, and you are fantastic content creators, and I think we want to focus on domestic creativity and domestic energies, and leverage that the best way with advertising. And I think one thing I notice is that when I've played around with the on-demand from SABC or ETV on their websites or on different apps, seems a little bit behind the curve in this marketplace in terms of inserting advertising on the free TV platforms and having a broad kind of interactive, addressable advertising opportunity. So those are kind of my main summaries for our session today. And yeah, once again, thank you very much for an opportunity to be here.